Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you back to Ohio Exopolitics. I'm your host, Mark Snider, and we are broadcasting once again from the beautiful Dillon State Park here in East Central Ohio. I'd like to remind all of you to please press the follow button, and you'll be notified 1 hour prior to the start of the show. Everything on Ohio Exopolitics is educational, nonprofit, and covered under the Fair Usage Act. We are coming to you Saturday, March 9th, 2013, and our guest this evening is James Horak. James, I know you're doing better, but I'm so glad you could still join us this evening in your kind of weakened state. You've been fighting off a pretty bad flu, I hear.
Yeah, something that I wouldn't wish on anyone. For about 5.5 days, all I wanted to do was stay in bed.
Wow. It sounds like you've been going through a real bad one here, and I want to take this opportunity to tell the audience again about MMS, something I've mentioned before. And if you're using MMS, don't make the same mistake that I did. I didn't mix it with citric acid at first, and finally ran across somebody that told me it's almost of no value if you don't mix it with citric acid. So you want to take 1 drop of MMS for every 5 drops of citric acid. Let it sit there for 3 minutes. The MMS will turn yellow, and then it emits a very powerful gas. It's the gas that actually plays a role in fighting the viruses and whatnot. And when you actually take the MMS, make sure if you're going to put it in some other kind of drink that it's something that has no vitamin C in it, because vitamin C somehow negates the MMS from working. And don't forget also to use your D3. Stock up on your D3. So most people will do pretty good if they do those 2 things. I've been very fortunate for 4 years now. I haven't had any kind of flu, any kind of sickness, not even a runny nose since I've been doing that. And it's not like I use it every day. I just use it as I need it, as I feel a little bit under the weather. But I do try to take the D3 every day, so that must play a role as well. But Crystal couldn't make it either because of this flu, and James has been a real trooper for even being with us tonight here. I really appreciate it. And let me know if you just get too weak, James, and you can't hang in there. Are you able to lay down at all when you're on Skype?
Oh, I don't need to lay down. I've had enough of that. It's just whether or not I start getting very hoarse, because I still have a tendency to my throat get dry, and then I'll start coughing. But I've got a big glass of water here to keep my whistle wet, and hopefully that'll do it.
Well, I'll be sure to do a lot of talking tonight, this evening, too, and I won't leave you hanging on the line there in a big monologue unless we have some kind of big issue on this end. I've also got a kind of a situation I'm dealing with. One of my dogs just got back from surgery, so we got him back home, and if I do have to run off, I'll play some music or something, and maybe James can fill in a little bit in that case. But I wanted to start out the show playing a clip about Vatican sex crimes. And I'm not sure if James will be able to hear this or not. I'll turn this way up and try to get my microphone over there. I'm kind of a jerry-rig here a little bit on my Skype situation. But I think the Vatican plays a role in the New World Order, and I'm not sure exactly where, but I know they're part of the picture, and I think it's very significant that we had all the child abuse scandals, and then we also had the stepping down of this recent pope, which most people don't realize that Ratzinger literally is his name, and he was the cardinal that was in charge of covering up all the child abuse scandals. So here we go with our clip this evening on Vatican sex crimes.
By churchmen. You've got a written policy that says the Vatican will control these situations, and you also have, I think, clear written evidence of the fact that all they're concerned about is containing and controlling the problem. Nowhere in any of these documents does it say anything about helping the victims. The only thing it does is say that they can impose fear on the victims and punish the victims for discussing or disclosing what had happened to them.
The procedure was intended to protect a priest's reputation until the church had investigated, but in practice, it can offer a blueprint for cover-ups.
Habemus papam.
The man in charge of enforcing it for 20 years was Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger, the man made Pope last year. In 2001, he created the successor to the decree. In spirit, it was the same, overarching secrecy with a threat of excommunication. He sent a copy to every bishop in the world. But now he ordered that the Vatican must have what he called exclusive competence. In other words, all child abuse allegations must go exclusively to Rome.
It's all controlled by the Vatican, and at the top of the Vatican is the Pope. So Joseph Ratzinger was at the middle of this for most of the years that Creeman was enforced. He created the successor to Creeman, and now he's the Pope. This all says that the policy and the systematic approach has not changed.
Cardinal Ratzinger's new decree was a missed opportunity to modernize the church's approach just as its biggest scandal was about to break in America. Columns traveled there to discover whether these were isolated cases sadly mishandled or a Vatican policy of cover-up.
James, I wanted to ask you, have you done any kind of investigation of your own on these Vatican child abuse scandals?
Oh, as much as most that are interested in the subject and doing something about it. The trends of the Catholic Church, economic and political, changed a great deal after World War II. The church itself had never been designed around fulfilling any of the admonitions of Christ or keeping faith with the Ten Commandments. It was a political institution foremost and a moneymaker foremost. So the moral concerns, the ethical concerns, for instance, the policing of the priesthood or the clergy, these didn't matter to it. They hadn't mattered to it since the Middle Ages. So why would that change? And it didn't. The prevalence of the Catholic Church by the globalists as a world religion is based on it being still to this day a feudal designed institution, just like it was in the 9th century and the 14th century when it was regarded as the first estate of the feudal order. Now, the church has been promised that it will, under the New World Order, that will have sway over all lands that it ever possessed and held title to, and when it was at its strongest, which would be around the 11th century. It was in the 50s that we know this occurred, because by 55, the church begins selling titles based on what it expects to get when the New World Order is instituted and implemented in full, and it's given this sway. In fact, even families like the Kennedy family purchased a principality for $2 million from the Catholic Church. The desire to have titles is more in place in the American psyche than it is in any European one. And the rich, the American rich, made fools of themselves trying to buy estates and titles during the industrial age when the United States took a great economic leap over England. So that sort of Napoleonic return to empire was present. And we think in terms of, always thought in terms that we had a classless society in the United States. We never had a classless society in the United States. We have too many people in the United States that are so intrigued and enchanted with titles and with being granted knighthoods, and people at the very top, that they are traitors. You cannot have a foreign title, like a knighthood, and hold a public office in the United States by law. Yet, Bush, Clinton, all of these people have been knighted while they were in office. So who do they serve? That's the question, who do they serve? And who does the Vatican serve? The Vatican isn't a power unto itself and hasn't been since World War II, to some extent before that. If you don't believe me, then look how many sides that it's been on from World War I through World War II. And, you know, the interesting thing about that is that the Catholic Church, the pontiffs of the Catholic Church, don't ever seem to be troubled about absolutism in any form, whether it's secular or religious.
James, you said a whole lot of very interesting things there. One thing that stuck out for me is that you said that the New World Order has made some kind of deals with the Vatican. What exactly are those deals again?
That the world religion, or the New World Order, and of course they're going to change the institutional teachings and the emphasis and much of the way in which this is put together on a historical or pseudo-historical basis. They have promised to give the Catholic Church all of the lands and titles it had sway over when it was the most powerful as first estate of the feudal estates. People have to understand what feudalism is, how it's erected, and how the wealthy in this country, especially those that own cartels, practice primogeniture, which is a major facet of feudalism. Primogeniture is the giving to the eldest son of a cartel family or of a feudal family, like the Rothschilds, like the Rockefellers, like the DuPonts, control of all the wealth. By doing so, they place all that power, that leverage, in one single hand. And that eldest son is expected to keep control of the family in under tight rein. This has not changed among the elite whatsoever. They retain every facet of feudalism that they can, and that's what they yearn to return us to. Under feudalism, the serf is bonded to the land. He's even worse off than a slave because he can't ever be moved off that land. So he's immobile. And there are so many excesses, like noblesse oblige and a number of other feudal institutions, hunting the maiden, what is secretly practiced at Bohemian Cove today. These are monstrous. To say they're extra-legal it's something that has been going on now in the United States since World War II in a pretty extensive way. And if you understand how much that Aleister Crowley affected or infected English society, we had the similar people doing it here, like Jack Parsons, who founded JPL. He wasn't as successful as Aleister Crowley because it was never organized as well. The elite in America were distanced apart. You know, in England, they could all attend the same parlor games and so forth, rituals, ceremonies, and so forth, without too much trouble. But here in the United States, so it was more loose-knit. And Parsons and another fellow that were just pure evil. I'm not saying Parsons was pure evil. Parsons was an aberrant, but not evil like this other gentleman, and this other gentleman was the Rasputin of America. But Jack Parsons was so successful in the practice with this gentleman of sexual psychic magic that Aleister Crowley wanted to anoint Jack Parsons to be his heir apparent to the Golden Dawn.
Wow. Sexual psychic magic. That is over
let me assure you that this threads its way through the mafia, it threads its way through the church, it threads its way through all kinds of political affiliations and secret societies. It has a symbolic representation in the Red Mass that is held in Washington, D.C. once a year, in which all the key politicos attend.
Wow, that's incredible. I definitely want to get back to some of that information, James, and thanks for hanging in there. I want to read some prophetic material here. After the turn of the millennium, the papacy will exist only a short period of time. Pope John Paul II is the third from last in this position. After him, only one additional pontificate will follow. Then a Pontifex Maximus follows, who will be known as Petros Romanus. Under his religious rule, the end of the Catholic Church will come, a total collapse becoming inevitable. That will be the beginning of the worst catastrophe that will ever have befallen the human beings of earth. Many Catholic clerics, priests, bishops, cardinals, and many others will be killed, and their bloods will flow in the streets, but also the Reformed version of Christianity will become just as infinitely small as does Catholicism. The current pope that would just step down was Joseph Ratzinger, and before he became the pope, he was the cardinal that was in charge of covering up the child abuse scandals. I'm going to play another clip from our BBC movie called Vatican Sex Crimes.
To discover whether these were isolated cases, sadly mishandled, or a Vatican policy of cover-up.
At the same time as the scandals were erupting in Ireland in 2002, hundreds of cases were emerging here in the United States. A U.S. report tells us that almost 4,500 U.S. priests have been accused of raping or sexually abusing children.
Its epicenter was Boston. The same stories repeated time and again, the church quietly shifting accused priests from parish to parish, allegations of a systematic cover-up. Colin tracks down Patrick Wall, a former Benedictine monk who became the Vatican-approved enforcer of Primus Solicitationis in his Minnesota diocese.
I was part of the system that was getting chewed up and being used deceptively, and it was a real dark night of the soul. Everything that I had trained for, well over a decade to do, I found out that I wasn't working for a holy institution, but an institution that was wholly concentrated on protecting itself.
When a priest was accused of sexual abuse, the abuser was slipped quietly away, and Father Patrick was moved in.
Most of the cases never saw the light of day, hence we were successful. That is really the ultimate definition of success for the church when it comes to a case of sexual abuse of a minor, that no one ever finds out about it. That it gets shut down, that it's kept quiet. If a payoff is needed or some kind of a settlement is needed, it's done. We had a $7 million budget in 1996 to do such things. But the thing that we had to have was a confidentiality order where it absolutely had to be agreed that everything was quiet.
The question is the New World Order trying to move America towards a civil war? I ultimately see that this is a potential or a possibility. They're running roughshod over the Constitution on purpose, and I'm wondering if their goal isn't ultimately to split up the United States into 3 to 5 different areas. I think the world is easier to rule if the United States is split up. Anyway, particularly, we've been discussing these hundreds of cases of child abuse that are emerging in the United States and Ireland. One U.S. report states that 4,500 priests have been accused of raping and sexually abusing children. The center of this abuse seemed to be in Boston. And the clip that we were listening to talks about a man named Patrick Wall, a former Benedictine monk who became the Vatican enforcer of the child abuse cover-up. The monk states that most of the cases never saw the light of day. The goal of the church was that the abuse events would be covered up, and if need be, a payoff would occur. This monk had a budget of $7 million to cover up these cases. And James, you were bringing up some real interesting things there. You were talking about Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons. And could you tell our audience a little bit about how these guys might be related to what's going on with the Vatican child abuse scandals?
Well, the connection would be through the Illuminati. The attraction to the Illuminati has always been whatever succeeds in influencing people to do your will. And, of course, that was Aleister Crowley's credo, and anyone that followed in his footsteps usually adapted it too. But when the one lady that broke with the Illuminati started giving information about their ceremonies and the rites of passage, which involves disemboweling a very young child, and beneath the Vatican, with what is evidently a cardinal present, the tie-ins become obvious. You have as much Satanism practiced in high places in the church as anywhere else.
Wow.
That's why it's been protected. That's why FBI and local police will lie and do anything they have to do. When you find evidence of Satanism and you go report it, they just tell you you're crazy. They'll claim to examine it or whatever. They do nothing but cover it up, and this has been going on for 150 years.
Wow.
And it even relates to Jack the Ripper, for Christ's sake. People don't realize that insiders in Scotland Yard revealed 50 years ago that Jack the Ripper would send a letter to Scotland Yard telling them where he was going to do his next deed. And they would make sure that he wasn't interfered with. So, is that satanic? Well, if it isn't satanic, people say it's Masonic. Well, I would say when you start involving human sacrifice with Masonic ritual, you are committing Satanism, regardless. Because what is Satanism? Satanism is to exalt hysteria to a point where you can either control it or you can exercise an almost out-of-body experience with it. Like this fellow that I can never remember his name, that was wrapped up with Jack Parsons, who I call an American Rasputin. The powers that be are intrigued by aberrancy, and the worse that it is, the more they're intrigued with it and they emulate it. Because it creates an illusion of what they can do that people like you and me can't. As if we would if we could. I would hope that very, very few people in my class would ever fall to committing any of these atrocious practices. But as far as the Catholic Church is concerned, there is a point at which, and I'd say 4,500 priests is that point, where you have to wonder, is this merely indulged, or is it promoted by church prelates? And why is it promoted? And the one reason, and I mentioned this on the last show we did, that way back when they pontificated their doctrine of infallibility, that had to be in anticipation of these kind of abuses. Because why would you need a doctrine of infallibility if you didn't intend to break the commandments?
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it that way. Now, isn't Jack Parsons somehow involved with NASA, or am I incorrect?
Well, yeah, indirectly, but he founded JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
So how is a Satanist involved with the Jet Propulsion Laboratory?
Same reason they're involved with NASA and the bigwigs in the Air Force.
I have a guest who comes on the show sometimes. His name is Douglas Dietrich, and I forget the guy's name, but he calls him the U.S. Army's satanic chaplain. And he said the guy was able to somehow conjure demons or something, even in the time of the Vietnam War. Have you heard anything about any of this kind of thing, James?
Yes. It goes back to Himmler and what he was up to.
So we can trace this back to the Nazis.
Oh, you can trace it back further than that.
You also talked about the red mass and sexual ritual magic. Can you elaborate on that at all?
Well, it's like a convention of the powers that be that meet together under the auspices of a common religious belief, you might say, but that's a mere cover for what it is and what it represents. The fact that newspapers and magazines no longer mention when it's being held and where in Washington, D.C., should demonstrate that it has a nefarious purpose.
You also talked about the Bohemian Grove, and I've heard Alex Jones talk about that, and that is, from what I've heard, kind of a public satanic ritual of sorts. Is that correct?
Well, they have the ritual with the owl, which is the death of compassion ritual. And it's a do as you will type thing again. But they also have a little sport there called hunting the maiden. Goes back to the feudal excesses.
Hunting the maiden, I can only imagine what that might be.
Dogs, and the hunters are on horseback, and instead of chasing a fox or a stag, chase a nude woman, a maiden.
And do they still do that, James?
At Bohemian Grove, they do.
Is the woman mistreated at all, or is it just a ritual kind of thing?
No, they kill her pretty fast.
No, they seriously, you think that they're actually committing murders at Bohemian Grove. Is this true?
Of course. They did this in the Middle Ages. And you can go into some museums today and see some pre-Renaissance paintings that show it. That show them chasing a woman who is nude through the woods with dogs on horseback.
You know, it seems to me like I'm living in some kind of B-grade science fiction movie. I went to work out today, and I'm looking at the skies, and there's chemtrails everywhere. So I come into the gym, and the little girl there is probably 22 years old, working in the front of the desk, and I told her, I said, you know, we don't have blue skies anymore. And I told her, when I was your age, about 20 years ago or so, we actually had beautiful, deep blue skies. But now we have a permanent air pollution that's there all the time. And these people that are doing these ritual, sexual, magic type rituals at Bohemian Grove and things like that, those are the same people that are spraying our skies with this incredible pollution that will could literally destroy the planet, I suppose. James, can you make any link between the Satanism and this child abuse and the abuse that's happening to the actual planet itself?
Well, some of it is technicians that can be referred to loosely as social engineers. A lot of it's done by people that have only a niche. They don't have any overview. They don't really realize. Some of them may be stupid enough to think that geoengineering is helpful to the environment or helpful to the health of the planet or something. They're stupid. That's right. I mean, they're stupid. I mean, we have seen so much exception to that. And, you know, some of the things that I've talked about, like what the scientists won't discuss, is a small microbe life that lives throughout our atmosphere, all the way up to the ionosphere in some cases. It helps filter the white light that we get and changes the range of light which strikes us. We should be getting a more yellow light, not the white light. It's the white light that's killing all the plants and killing the grass and everything all over the world. You see, white light is unfiltered. The white light contains the full spectrum of light coming to us from the cosmos. So, do we want white light? Well, it would take us a long, long time to evolve the modifications necessary to really be able to thrive in white light. It would probably have to grow scales. But the problem is that they kill these microbes. They kill them in the soil. I think one of the funniest things I ever read, we've got a school here that is the laughing stock of Texas. It's A&M. And they have Texas School of Agriculture and Engineering. And, a little while ago, they came up with a microbe that would devour fire ants. All they had discovered, well, no, they hadn't discovered it. What they had done is they had found some of this microbe that had survived the phosphate fertilizers that had been in place in North America all along, which kept the fire ants south of us. Once they started using the phosphate fertilizers universally, these little microbes were killed, and here come the fire ants. But they're too stupid to figure that out at A&M. And I'm using stupid because these people call themselves scientists.
I want to step back to something you said earlier that really perked me up here. You talked about white light getting to the earth. And, okay, this is my observation. And I just have kind of observed this over the years. It seems to me that back 20 years ago, that the sun used to appear much more yellow, that it felt comfortable on my skin. Now it seems much whiter, and it feels much more uncomfortable on the skin.
Well, what are you looking at? When you're looking at the sun, you're looking through the atmosphere.
Right.
That's a lens.
Exactly.
It's a lens, only the elements of that lens have changed. No longer do they have the filtering qualities that they had 20 years ago. You know how long they've been chemtrailing?
I don't even see. How long?
15 years.
God.
They just didn't admit it. Now they do. It's amazing to me how liars can win respect by never coming clean, but just changing the story. Look, they're trying to create a hostile alien thesis. They're getting everybody prepared for it. The very same people that did everything they could to deny it and punish anybody that had evidence or that had any contact or whatever are killed. We can talk all day about so many things, but it's not going to make a difference until the people in America start going hungry. When they go 2 days without food, they'll wake up. And nobody can predict what's going to happen. And these idiots that want to find out, I don't want to find out. I know you don't want to find out. But we're going to find out because they're going to push them that far. And it won't be a matter of them going crazy like they think. It'll be a matter of them suddenly realizing that people like you and me and people that we know, what we were telling them was true.
Right.
They're going to start pulling it together right away. That's going to be very dangerous for the monsters.
Well, I like the way you say monsters. And it's interesting, we kind of went from satanic rituals to child abuse, Vatican sex crimes, the earth being destroyed through these chemtrails. But the other thing that the New World Order has been doing for many, many years is hiding or covering up our history. And before James and I came on the air, we were talking a little bit about a book called UFO Contact from the Pleiades, written by Lieutenant Colonel Wendell Stevens. And it has a fascinating section in it that I just want to read to you guys to give you an idea of what the powers that be have been covering up all these years. The Great Pyramid, which was undoubtedly designed for astronomical purposes, is oriented that in 2170 BC, when the Pleiades were on the meridian at midnight on the first day of spring, they could be seen through the South Passageway. In mid-March of 1980, a good friend of mine, this is Colonel Wendell Stevens speaking, a good friend of mine, Dr. Lawrence Kennedy, was visiting Egypt and took some time to inspect the ancient pyramids there. He was looking for evidence of the mysterious energy so often reported from that place and was trying to ascertain their source and the nature of the now popular pyramid energy itself, if possible. In addition to the public tours, he arranged a private tour of the pyramid complex for his party. Now, this is a section I wanted to tell everyone about. One of the things not on the regular tour program was a visit to Zozer's pyramid, and in particular, an opportunity to examine a chamber in the pyramid that is not open to the public. Now, Zozer's pyramid is one of the more recent pyramids, one of the smaller ones. It's one of the stepped pyramids that's kind of falling apart now. Okay, to his great surprise, and this is Dr. Lawrence Kennedy's surprise, he discovered there was a mural painting on one wall of the room that clearly showed a larger cylindrical cigar-shaped object in the air above the area and surrounded by several other airborne discs, objects of circular disc shape. An extensive inscription under the picture, done in ancient Proto-Egyptian picture writing, described a visit to Egypt by celestial beings who came here from another place in the heavens. On the ceiling of the same room was a pattern of stars and a blue field that looked like the Pleiades star groups. No cameras or recorders are allowed in the parts of the pyramid complex is not open to the public, and the Egyptian government has released very little on this particular room up to this time. So we have one painting in this ancient pyramid that would just topple the entire cover-up. James, I wondered if you could comment on this incredible painting that Colonel Stevens is talking about.
Well, yes, that's an EMV. It was set up for there to be contact, and members of the extended community visited, and they left a detachment of a former lineage. And this lineage established a priesthood in Egypt. And when they moved to Rome, they became the Etruscans. Actually, they founded Rome. But these were different people. These were your brothers and sisters from a prior lineage. They were returned because it was thought that their wisdom as seers would be helpful in trying to avert the cycle from repeating this time around, because it was accepted that this would be the last lineage.
There's a lot of drama in that statement there. Wow, thank you very much for that, James. I'm going to bring a caller on the line here. I want to welcome Hugh to the show this evening. Hugh, how are you this evening?
Very good. Fascinating show as always with James. Thank you. I want to bring to James's attention something that I just became aware of, and I'm standing in solidarity with them. There is a group of Lakota grandmothers, and there is a website that's just coming online. It's Lakota, Lakota, grandmothers.org. April 1st, they're going to start a 12-city tour ending up in Washington, D.C., and asking why treaties have not been honored. Of course, the treaties haven't been honored because the falsified treaties to begin with. The grandmothers and the indigenous people are the matriarchs, and they tell the chiefs what to do, and these treaties were all signed by chiefs, not by the matriarchs, by the grandmothers at all. So this is going to be fascinating information coming out to the masses, and I'm just wondering what James, if he knows anything about the indigenous peoples along those lines.
James, were you able to hear any of that?
Oh, yes. The Lakota have a right to a matriarchal society, the same as the Navajo. I think that the Lakota may very well be able to make a success of it. They are, by rights, a matriarchal society. The fact that these treaties did not honor them tells me that in the Lakota's eyes, they are invalid. What's really happened recently that excites me a great deal is a common law case against the Queen and against other war criminals that has been won in Canada over some indigenous children there that the Queen just took on one of her little tours of her colony. And so they pretty well nailed it down in common law court. And now they have, since there was no compliance to their demands for the Queen to defend herself or whatever, or anyone else for that matter, they have gone on to convict them, and they are issuing arrest warrants. It'd be wonderful if this picks up some steam and people start asserting it, because international law is their biggest gun. They know how to use it, and they refer to international law in article. The only thing that people may not understand about it is that in law, might is not supposed to make right. The letter of the law is supposed to make right. And so by the letter of the law, just because it's common law, just because it's put together by people outside the Shions of power, the still should carry weight. And it certainly will in the court of public opinion once it gets out. And the alternative media needs to get off their behind and start putting this out there for everyone to see. Because these children just didn't disappear into thin air.
Yeah, there's a lot of indigenous children that were killed, or I guess they were killed, basically. And that's part of this whole scandal that's going on right now. It's just a continuation of all of these crazy scandals that's going on, and there's so much more we could talk about. James, it's been a fascinating show. Your website, I'll give to everybody again, is emvsinfo.blogspot.com, and we've been talking about the New World Order again and all the intricacies that are involved in that. James, is there any closing thoughts you'd like to give to our audience?
I think everyone should come to terms with the realities of what we're facing today and have a coming to Christ moment with what they're going to do when things really get bad. It's going to take that for you to have a chance to survive, if you're even going to want to. And I'm hoping that there'll be plenty of us that want to, but like I said, and I said from the start, when it gets to a point where it's a place no one will want to live, well, it'll be over.
Well, thanks, James. I appreciate you coming this evening again. Fantastic show. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. Folks, you're listening to Ohio Exopolitics. Our guest this evening has been James Horak, and we're still getting great information, still more and more to talk about here. I want to wish you all a good evening, and we'll be back on tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Talk to you later.